Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast. And it was the variety of spice last weekend as we look back on action from snowy roads of Sweden to the banked ovals of Daytona and the city streets, that's easy for me to say, of Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. All very entertaining, but all in very different ways. Do you want to kick off with any news?
No news, no.
There's none really.
Just comment really on what with this variety. I mean, this is what I love about motorsport. You know, I think this is why half the reason I do this podcast. It's trying to spread this word.
It's certainly not for the money.
No. Well, people are so obsessed with Formula One, aren't they? It's only, and when we do a Formula One podcast, we get much bigger, we double our numbers. So as you do any Formula One gossip. And yet last weekend, it was just brilliant. I mean, so much. I mean, as I said, the variety, you know, rallying through Sweden, Daytona 200 mile an hour, and then Formula E, you know. And I think this is what's always good to try and wake people up. If you haven't watched rallying, then have a go. If you haven't watched NASCAR, have a look at it. If you haven't watched Formula E, even though we don't recommend it.
Well, there's certainly lots of talking points on all three of those, and in fact, there are sort of bits of news, but I think they come under each one of those three categories. Other than Formula One's launching tomorrow, I think in London, this glitzy thing.
Big excitement. Take that at playing. Apparently, I've just read this morning that is what makes
they were at the BAFTAs as well. Wow.
Oh, there you go. They've got a bloody documentary out, haven't they? They're all PRing this month. Is that Take That?
I don't know.
There's a trailer that says it's 20 years ago. It's time we taught the truth.
No, that's Westlife, you donut. That's
they're all the same. They're all the same.
Right, let's go. Let's start with Sweden because it was
great news. Elfyn Evans, absolutely, he dominated it. Really,
is it his year? Is it going to be his year? I hope it is.
We're all hoping. I mean, so Rally won 4 years ago. He was second there last year, which probably Rovanperä beat him. And he loves the snow and he's brilliant at it. And a couple of times he lost a few seconds and dropped. I mean, it was so tight. I mean, it was a Toyota weekend. And it was Takamoto Katsuta looking for his first ever, who also nearly won it, I think, last year. Takamoto likes the snow as well. But it was like 3 seconds in it. He was leading by 3 seconds, losing by 3 seconds. Which a bit kind of comes to my worry about rallying again. Because it's hard to watch and enjoy because it's so same. And the cars seem to be getting better and better. And it's becoming more and more like Formula One. You've got to have the right car. Because it's been a Toyota weekend. They're only like 3 seconds quicker than the Hyundais. But you watch the stage stuff, which is spectacular. You go on board and you can't believe the speed they're doing. And it's fascinating just to watch that. But then when you actually watch them following the stage and every car's the same angle, same place, they're not that sideways, they're not that... I mean, they're right between Snowbanks. How do they keep doing it at that pace? So it's amazing. And yet it's not exciting because it's not a competition you can see. In fact, funny enough, I noticed on the first day, someone at rallying must decide we've got to do something, you know, because all these other sports, don't they, have these sort of side shows that make it more exciting. So they lined up this ski-mobile world champion. And it was on one, because they repeated it for every driver that went through. And in fact, the drone shot was very wide. And you can see the stage manager, whatever you call him, the snow manager, with his little flag up, waiting for the rally car to arrive. And then he flagged the ski-doo bloke to accelerate out from the woods. So he arrived into the inside of the corner with the rally car behind it. So he went round the inside and shot out of the picture. And you thought, well, what did that? And they repeated it for every car that went through the stage. And I can assure whoever invented that at the World Rally Championship, it didn't really enhance the sport in any way. But yeah, the other news, I mean, Kalle Rovanperä, we talk about, still subdued. He was fifth. He was behind the two Hyundais of Thierry Neuville and Ott Tanak, who were third and fourth. He's still not got his rallying feet back on again. He's been off drifting and doing other stuff, and he can't get back into the swing of things. And It was interesting. The Ford camp was interesting watching that because, in fact, in the end, the leading Ford in sixth was the Latvian kid, Martin Seix. But Ireland's Josh McAlean, who had a really sort of very timid Monte Carlo rally. Who can blame him? His world championship debut between the walls of Monte Carlo and the ice and the unpredictability of it. But he actually led the Ford charge until Seix caught him and overtook him. And he unfortunately put on a snowbank on the last day, which is a bit of a shame. But he was quicker than Greg Wildman.
What's known as the toughest surface? Is it gravel or is it? Because it's not snow anymore.
Well, no, because snow is so consistent. I know the commentators trying to hype it up as much as possible because they were cutting through. When the stage gets reused, they go through the ice and then there's a bit of gravel on the line, so they have to sort of compensate slightly. But I think it's a very, because in the forest, you come off a nice dry bit of gravel, you plunge into forest, and it's all wet and muddy gravel. So you've got a massive change of grip you have to do. And same with Monte Carlo, you're on tarmac and then you're on icy tarmac. I think the thing about, which is why the times are so close, is they're doing hundreds of kilometres of, and they're all about a second and a half apart. And you think, well, how do they all that? Well, it's so fraught with potential. In fact, only two of them ended up going into snowbanks. Of all 4 days, only Formeau, when he was upset and having a bit of a go, we'll talk about him in a minute. And also, sadly, McAlean on the last day. So only 2 of them fell off. There's only 10 World Rally Championship cars out there, WRC ones. So the pros, they're all just going in the groove. And as I said, you sort of watch them and it's amazing, but then it's not an exciting competition. It's a shame with rally. I always have this problem.
Well, it is a shame, and the difference is it is the same with Formula One or any motorsport. They're taking the same line, and their cars are doing exactly the same thing on every corner. But the difference is they're racing. They're on the track together, and they might be offline or they might be going for an overtake. So that's the difference. But it is spectacular to watch, as you've always said.
Yeah. But the biggest drama, the biggest story is Adrian Formeau, the French guy, who's actually leading the Hyundai battle. And then coming up to the stage, on one stage, he realised he hadn't done his helmet up. And so he had this panic, and he started 20 seconds late, I think, and he was off the pace. And then
Have you ever done that? Have you got a routine?
Absolutely bizarrely, in a Formula Ford historic race about 3 years ago, in my little Lotus 69F, I lined up on the grid at Thruxton, and the bloke next to me looked at me and said,
Do you know who was it? Do you know who it was?
Yeah, I forget his name. Ben Sims, who's a real great competitor. No, it might have been the young guy. What's the old names anyway?
How did you notice that?
That's brilliant. Probably hanging down.
I used to have a checklist in my head. There's only 3 things, but it sounds so simple. It's such simple stuff. But obviously your hands device and your helmet strap. But helmet, I never had. That wasn't on my checklist. It was just hands device. Anyway, I can't even remember what it was.
Funny enough, the same kid, I think, once he didn't do the roll bar hoop. It's got because you take it off when you're working on the engine, putting the engine cover off. It's just the one that goes to the rollover bar, and it's bolted at the top. And he hadn't re-bolted it. And someone must have pointed at him because he was on the grid. He put his hand up and he could, you can feel that. He had to pit for that. But yeah, little things on the grid. But Formeau became the story of the rally, apart from Elfyn Evans' brilliant win. Because having lost his time, because he was leading the Hyundai Challenge, having lost all his time because he hadn't done his chin up. And at the end of the stage, at the end of the day or the next day, he was in the usual interview at the end of the car, how are you doing, Adrian?
Thrusting a camera in your face when you're absolutely buzzing on adrenaline, just finished, you just made a mistake,
and he said,
and then you expect the most the most articulate and perfect response.
He was still pissed off. Fucked up yesterday. £30,000 is the fine.
20,000 is deferred.
There was 10,000 he had to pay, and 20.
And that's euros as well, but still, it's a big old chunk for an emotional appeal, and we'll come on to another emotional radio.
I've got that. You've got that.
We'll come on to that in a moment.
Mr. Tickton, perhaps you mean. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we'll come on to that.
Come on to Formula. So, what's your view on this? What's your view on the FIA interfering? Well, they're not interfering because they're the governing body. But what's your view on them imposing such strict fines on the drivers like this?
It's ridiculous. I mean,
Not his first language.
Comedians are using it on television now. Even before the watershed, I think you can use the F word, can't you? I mean, every comedian's used the F word non-stop, and it's
no way were they shut on before the watershed. No
isn't
way.
It? Well, anyway, post 9 o'clock.
I don't think so. Yeah,
but I suppose so. But I mean, if you go to a football match, you take your little kids to a football match. There's effing and blinding. The C word was shouted at some referee. They were calling the referee a C word. It's hard to. How can you shield? You can't shield these children anymore. I don't think.
Well, perhaps we say hats off to the FIA for trying to shield the children, and they're doing a great job for doing so. Somebody introduced me to a lovely song yesterday. Bruno Mars. He's famous, so very, very good, very upbeat, and very clean cut. So his latest track is "Fat, Juicy, and Wet." What's that? Southampton, yeah. Tiff is thrusting his Southampton mug to the screen.
I'm still supporting,
and they lost again over the weekend. And they're going to the championship. But yeah, so Bruno Mars's latest is "Fat, Juicy, and Wet," and it is exactly what you think he's singing about. So there is no hiding. So maybe we say hats off to FIA because they are trying to do a good job. But
are they just blowing against the hurricane?
Well, I just think common sense sometimes has to prevail. I think yes, there's a line and there's got to be a line as well, but common sense has to prevail. If they're expecting people when they're full of adrenaline, just finish something to be perfectly eloquent, because they want that reaction as well. They want it because they got TV all over the place now, and they want those sort of reactions, the emotional reactions. So I just think a bit of common sense.
But I think it makes you understand how upset he is. If they won the winner, Dad, you made a mess yesterday. Oh, yes, I made a little error, old boy. Or, I slightly made a mess of my day. You think
he's turned to 1940s British all of a sudden.
Yes, I say. But I made a jolly mess of yesterday, didn't I? Sorry about that. So,
who was the best speaking commentator you've ever heard on
Murray
over
Walker,
your years?
Murray Walker.
No, he wasn't. Yeah, but he wasn't. He didn't have the elocution that you just
Raymond Baxter.
were demonstrating.
Baxter was Raymond Baxter. Baxter in the 50s, Raymond Baxter. But I mean, as long as it stays as fines, as long as it doesn't start becoming point deductions and suspensions or points on your license, because I mean, Verstappen's nearly getting and losing a couple of races, isn't he? He's got points. So long as they don't add it, but I think they are in Formula One. I think they're going to add it as points on your license.
We're bitching and moaning, saying we don't like all this chanting and swearing, and the FIA is saying, well, we're eradicating it, and we're complaining to them as well. So it is a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And speaking of which, it's a nice transition to go to NASCAR because Trump was there, and it is a bit of damned if you do, damned if you don't. So he's been slagged off for flying his Air Force One over Daytona. He's been slagged off for driving around the oval in the.
But he did it when I was there in 2020.
Did he?
So this was, Trump and his pump and glory because the economy was going up. He did his speech, I've improved, I've reduced immigration, I've increased earnings, I've increased employment, and the whole. I mean, NASCAR crowd are slightly to the right wing, I would suggest. And they were all chanting 4 more years, 4 more years. Then COVID came when he lost the plot, and now he's back. And so, they adore him. And when you're sitting in the grandstands, you can see the airfields. You see Air Force One landing, everyone cheering, Trump's here. So, Trump was there in 2020. And I can assure you, they all love him. Unbelievable.
You can't. It must be awful being a politician these days because if you've got an opinion, if you've got a view, there's no, like, I can see the middle ground with all these people and all these policies and whatever, and there's middle ground. My daughter is very much, well, Dad, bit more left wing, and may I say, a bit more right wing. But with Trump, you can't win. So he's trying to save all this money in the USA, and he's flying Air Force One over. That must have cost $25,000 in.
Well, I think he was en route to Saudi, isn't he? I think so. But I think the plane was it was almost just a stopover on before he came over to. He's coming over to end the war anyway. So he can spend
enough politics. Enough politics.
If he can end the war, then a bit of petrol money he can be excused. But
well, that's what someone said about driving around the oval. They said he's probably spent about $10 worth of gasoline, as they call it. But
it weighed 10 tons. Actually, I had to work out how many pounds it was. My son had to get the calculator out when they announced how many pounds it weighed, and we worked
10
it out.
tons.
But no, it was 9 tons.
Wow. Bomb-proof, bulletproof. Wow.
But back to the racing, the greatest show on earth, and the Trump
is it the greatest show on earth?
The build-up there's nothing like the build-up. The jet's coming over. You can be down right by the cars lined up in the pit lane. You've got the driver intros. You're sitting on the grass, and it's just pomp and ceremony.
What are they called? The Blue Angels? Is that what they call?
Yeah, they were. It was different every year. I don't know, this year there was the Blue Angels or something. And the build-up is just epic, and you standing up and you got your hand on your heart and the red Star-Spangled Banners being sung out loud. And they all go around at 60 miles an hour. Then the first time they come around at 200 miles an hour, it's just, it's just huge spectacle.
Yeah.
It does then turn out to a long, drawn-out race with
I was
fuel saving. Fuel saving. Formula E people don't listen now, but yes, they have fuel saving big time at Daytona because obviously the less you fill up, the less time you have to stop in the pit. So it is a long, drawn-out race. Unfortunately, it was even longer this time because it rained, and they don't race in the rain. So I think it
maybe 4 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah, 7 p.m. and restarted 11, didn't it? So I watched the golf.
What a shame!
Time to watch the golf, but I gave up on one. I went to bed at midnight and then got up at 7 o'clock this morning and watched it as live, which is what's so great about Sky and the times 30, times 20. You can zizz through the boring bits. So yeah, it was a 200-lap race, and then one big shunt early on when Joey Logano's engine faltered on a restart, and they all piled into the back of each other. And they then drove round. I mean, it's still, although it's not racing, it's a bit like Formula E. They're just 3 lanes doing 195 miles an hour, 185 miles an hour, and you're just packed. And so it's still a jaw-dropping scene, even if it goes on for 30 laps with nothing changing. But then, of course, it's after 180 laps with 20 to go, it just starts kicking off. So it's going to kick off. So you've always got that anticipation in the back of your mind if it gets a bit dull. And of course, even the other thing, because I take a little tour party at some of these races I've been before, we take guests with Motor Passion. Sign up, come with us next year. We didn't go this year. And you've got the radio linking to any driver you want. You can tune in, you can there's talking to the spotter, so you can listen to them going around 180 with a car each side of them 2 inches away, chatting about, what our strategy is going to be. So that entertains you. Then, if that's boring, there's there's beer and hamburgers and frankfurters. So it went off. They had these huge shunts towards the end. Ryan Preece, who did that huge barrel roll a year ago, 2 years ago. He was the one that got sent flying up in the air, up on his roof again.
It must be so scary.
Oh, it's unbelievable. But that last shunt was caused by Joey Logano. Joey Logano is really the story because he was the one that caused the first crash when his engine faltered on a restart. So they all bump into each other and then spear off in all directions. But he'd come back right through the back of the grid, back through the whole pack. And with 12 to go, he was the fastest car there all day long. But he just got impatient. He tried to push his way through when there wasn't really a gap there, Joey. And he sent everybody going, including poor old Ryan Preece, into the air. He also took out his 2 teammates who were going to probably win. Cedric and Blaney were happily running out front, the front 2 looking really good. So it's drama. I mean, only 24 of the 41 cars managed to get to the end.
Didn't you put Larson into the side as well? Your mate? Yeah,
Larson got taken out. He was never on the pace, so number 5 was never really in the race at all.
Is Logano 22? Is he number 22?
The 5.
No.
Logano's 22. Yeah, Logano's 22. Yeah. And that's the Penske team. So their numbers 2, 12 and 22. All the 2s.
Okay.
And he wiped out his teammates with his impatient move. He was blocked quite badly. But then we had the final run to the finish, the final green-white checker, when Custin. He tried anyway. One of the new boys on the block tried to get past and came down and touched someone else. They all kicked off again, so they crossed the line all wrecking. And we're giving William Byron 2 races on the trot, 2 ones on the trot.
Wow.
And dear old Jimmy Johnson, who turns up occasionally now, the famous superstar of NASCAR in the past, who've been running around in the back all day long, end up third just by missing all the shunts.
Wow.
Cole Custer, that's it.
So what happens when you're in the stands like you are? It's different if you've got a motorhome or something, but if you're in the stands and you've got like a 4-hour delay, you just get drunk, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you can go back out to, they've got huge fairground shows, manufacturers, branding. You can go back out into the village, as it were, and do a bit more shopping, or drink another cold beer. So 4 hours is probably a bit long, and I got a bit patient after 4 hours. But,
entertainment-wise, what? How was it? Other than the obvious rain delay,
I think it was a pretty regular Daytona 500. Lots of boring bits in the middle, and then the spectacular stuff going on. Bits of drama with Joey Logano's engine problem, with a bit of dirt that got into the fuel injection pipe, which was the problem.
Wow, but, you wouldn't believe that would make a difference, would you? Just something so simple.
Just getting stuck in the because apparently there's the fresh air going to the front. They had there's quite big holes in the grille to let the air go to the engine, so they're big enough for small bits of debris, which quite surprised me that there wasn't a filter to stop that going in. But it's just a big show, Daytona, and it's a great place to go to. A bit of sunshine, although it wasn't sun shining.
So Motor Passion 2026.
Yeah, we're going to try and get the band back together. It's an expensive trip, but it's.
What does it cost the punter?
I don't know, it's about $4,000 or something. 5 days.
It's nothing.
I know. It's like Paddock Club. I know.
Does that include your hotels and your flights?
Not the flights. You've got to get there. We'll pick you up from the airport, chauffeur drive you all round. We go out to dinner. We go to the Saturday night local half-mile track for a bit of local racing. We watch the truck race on the Friday night. We go to the beach where Donald Campbell, Tiff Needell tells you lots of rubbish about what was happening there. And then we will go out and have another beer.
Where do people sign up? How do you sign up for that?
Motor Passion. We'll be launching
Steve at Motor Passion. Lovely guy.
Steve and Chantal. So great entertainment, but it's a show. And the thing about NASCAR, some races are boring and some are amazing, and you just got to get into the sport. I think they're trying to do a Drive to Survive thing now, aren't they? With more publicity about their drivers and their home lives and all that sort of stuff.
Is Drive to Survive still popular? I didn't watch. I never watched that 21.
I never watched one show, the first series.
I watched the first 2.
Well, they're lying here. That race didn't happen then. No, that's not there. No, hold on a minute. You're making this story up to make it more dramatic. So I didn't watch.
I think I told you the story about the tennis equivalent, whatever that's called, breakpoint or whatever it's called. They're showing a serve, and she goes up on her forehand, and she hits a serve she hits it to her forehand, and the serve there, and then they show the next clip. She's returning the serve on a backhand. And it's just how can they get these multi-million dollar productions making such amateur mistakes in continuity? Yeah, it put me off as well, but good for them if they want to do that. It'll be quite interesting with NASCAR. I'd like to see the NASCAR one.
Great. So we went from the snows of Scandinavia to the banked Daytona track, the raid, and then the other big event, of course, is Formula E, which I wouldn't normally get too excited about. But there were 2 things happening. It was back to Jeddah, new track, half the Grand Prix circuit with lots of chicanes. But it was a joyful thing to watch on both days, quite simply because Taylor Barnard is the most joyful young man. And it was just a delight to see his interviews. He's 20 years old. He looks about 12. He hasn't had the most.
And they use a photo of him that is so out of date because he's got like the cool mullet now. And the photo of him is so out of date, and he does look so young.
But the interviews, he's gleaming with it. And it was just, he had such a good weekend. He didn't win. We had a pole position and a second place. He had 2 second places. But
Who do you think the youngest pole in Formula One ever has been? So Taylor Barnard's 20 years and 259 days. Who's the youngest? Older or younger?
Younger. Max would have had a pole when he was about 19, didn't he?
No.
What's the youngest pole then?
21 and 72 days. So about 90, 100, about 90 days. Vettel. Vettel, believe it or not. And there's only a couple that have done it at 21. Charles, Max, Alonso. There's not that many who've done it at 21, surprisingly.
Anyway, I'm bored. You're crofting me now. Crofty on me. You've interrupted my pleasure.
Only because you didn't get the answer.
Only
because you didn't get the right answer.
Because he didn't have a very stellar career. He was second in German Formula 4 in 22. He had one F3 win when he did Formula 3, 23. Mind you, I think he had a really good end of the season in 23 in Formula. He had a second, a first, a fourth, and a third. He was second in Formula Regional, but he was never really getting for it. He had one season of Formula 2 with a rubbish team. He won one race, but it was a reverse grid race. And you know me and reverse grids don't really count. But he was at Monaco. So if you're going to be the 10th best driver or 12th best driver in
that's
qualifying,
the place to do it.
That's the place to do it. So he did win at Monaco, albeit reverse grid. And then he just did a McLaren rookie test at the end of 23 with the Formula E's, because most of the Formula E teams have to, by their rules, have rookies testing, and impressed them, obviously, signed him up. He had 3 races last year, I think, when Sam Bird was injured. So he got in and did 3, impressed the team then. He didn't finish particularly high. And now he's got a full season. You can just tell he's living the life. That's what I love about his enthusiasm. I think he's almost pinching himself. I'm a professional racing driver, because he probably thought the dream was over, when he had a bad season in Formula 2. Well, I'm not going to be an Ollie Behrman. I'm not going to get the break. What do I do next? So either you go GT racing or try to get to Le Mans with sports cars, or if, Formula E comes calling, however frustrating it might be to drive and race. And he was just absolutely living the moment. And that was such a joy to watch. The racing wasn't that bad, but then it wasn't. Again, it had these 2 endings that... in the first race, because it was mainly Nissan. You had to have Nissan engines, because McLaren and Nissan, Oliver Rowland was the man that beat him in race 2 to win race 2. But Oliver Rowland was leading race 1 until he ran out of fuel.
Charge.
The trouble is, I get told, when people run out of fuel with petrol and stuff, and yeah, true, it has happened. But it's because Formula E is, to their own admission, it's a conservation race, and that's part of the skill of winning a Formula E race. What I didn't know, because the commentator, it was a really good race when Rowland had dominated, but he was getting low, so he backed up, which is what always happens. And it was like 4 in a row behind him with the German guy in the DS Penske car. And Rowland did brilliant defending. It was a good race. I was really excited. And they were coming to the last chicane, and the commentator was going over the top. Will he make a lunge? Will he make a lunge? And I was thinking, Rowland's got this. All of a sudden, Rowland's car just slowed down. And Gunther just drove past him. The commentator then went into volume 11. He's done it. And I'm realising the reality of it. No, he's run out of gas. But what I didn't realise until he hired a staff mentioned Oliver, then Jake Dennis was up to about 3rd in the second race in his Andretti Porsche. And again, he, going into the final chicane, suddenly slowed down. And in the commentary afterwards, which I was listening to the interview, they actually have an automatic shutdown. I didn't know that, because I've always wondered how so many races, they all end up with 0%. I thought, God, how are the drivers doing that? How are they so clever that they can all just get to the line on 0%? And literally, when you get to 0%, because it isn't 0%, you have extra power in the battery, so you don't actually run out. But you're given a set amount of your battery that is the limit you use for that race. Yeah,
so they could easily race at full speed if they wanted to, because
they could do 50 kilowatt slow down battery. You can do 3 more laps. You do have more in your battery. But when it gets down to 0.001%, it cuts the throttle. You don't lift, the driver doesn't lift. So when Rowland suddenly slowed down, I thought, blooming hell, couldn't he have lasted another 10 yards and led into the final corner? But the same happened with, as I said, with Jake Dennis.
What happens if you're coming out of a final corner, and you're right behind you going for an overtake?
Well, exactly.
It's like missing a gear. You're going to go behind. You're going to
hit into the back of them, because apparently the system cuts. And as it then decelerates, it recharges enough to get to the line.
Wow.
That's why nobody actually seems to get disqualified for being 0%. Because I didn't know that. I didn't understand that. So and I think the more you understand about how much the cars are, computer running the system, computer doing your program. As I said, Nissan dominated. Porsche seemed to have dropped back from an early season.
JLR as well. They've
had 4 cars, just nowhere. So you pretty much had to have a Nissan. or who else was doing well? The Maserati went well, didn't it? They run their own engine. So we had a 1, 2, 3, 4 British run. So Elfyn Evans won in Sweden. We had Oliver Rowland, Taylor Barnard, Jake Hughes in the Maserati, and Jake Dennis in the Porsche. 1, 2, 3, 4 in race 2. So it was quite exciting racing.
Well, before we go on to Dan Tickton, before we go on to him, a couple of things I want to mention. One, a couple of rookies had a bit of a test before as well. Jamie Chadwick,
yes,
and a few of the others. They had a bit of a coming together, a bit of a miscommunication, and also in terms of the razzmatazz, because now they're doing this thing where they've got these influencers. In inverted commas, they got Brooklyn Beckham, they got Sergio Aguero, and a few other sort of international stars, and then making them race drivers. Which look great, but I think it almost undermines the sport a little bit. I'll be honest with you, because
it's just another stunt. It's another stunt.
It is.
It's a bit better than having a schemer-mobile racing around the inside of the corner. Maybe it's a better stunt. But of course, the other stunt which you haven't mentioned, because it went by with hardly anyone noticing it, is that they refueled for the first time.
Yeah.
And last week on this, what's the goal? It's going to be chaos. It's going to be embarrassing. But you almost didn't realise it. The fact it just broke up the race, like in Formula One, where half the field changes tyres and the other half hasn't. So the whole order's messed up. Then you just wait till they're all back on the same tyre strategy to see who's actually leading. But because only one of your team could come in at a time, and they didn't come all at the same, they sort of just drove slowly into the pits, and a man just plugged them in. And then after 30 seconds, they went back out again. And they did all come back out.
It's such nonsense. And for those of you shouting at Tiff saying, it's not refueling. It's not refueling. It's a
recharge.
It's a quick charge. It's such nonsense because they don't need to do this. So that the battery is big enough to do the whole race on full power. Yeah. But they restrict the battery, as you just said. So they do not need to do this. I don't see that adds any value. But
we didn't. Everyone came out where they were before they went in.
Yeah.
Didn't mix the field up. It just made you confused for about the middle 10 laps because half the field were recharging. So, it's all a bit weird still. But it did look quite good until, as I say, the engines cut out. Roland did such a good job in the first race. But then he'd used too much. If you use too much, you get a cutout. So we'll keep watching.
What do you make of this Dan Tickton?
As long as Taylor Barnard's still smiling, I'll be watching. And Dan Tickton, well, we know Dan's a bit vocal on the radio. We'd have to point out before we go any further, this was only heard by those on the app. So it didn't actually go out on the transmission. So he'd been called in by his team. Says, you've got to come in because we've got to reset something. They wouldn't explain what it was because, what? Yeah, so Dan starts getting up. Why can't we do it later? What? He then produced 8 fucks and 2 shits in the following conversation. 8 fucks. Someone remembers 9 fucks, but I missed a fuck or somewhere. Now, apparently the FIA have said that radio transmissions are semi-private. Therefore, he didn't transgress the ruling. Because they're semi-private and they didn't come out on the TV transmission. But anyone, again, a bit like NASCAR, one of the things Formula E have picked up, it's one of these app things to attract you to Formula E, is you can follow anyone, listen to their complete conversation, which is good. But then if you listen to Dan Tickton and your 6-year-old child's listening to Dan Tickton, then there might be some problems. But anyway, so Dan didn't get any punishment because it was a semi-private conversation.
I mean, I spent a bit of time with Dan in Mexico, and because I couldn't stand the way he was on the radio, couldn't stand it. And he's just, and he said, "Look, I'm a complex character, and all is not what you see." So I think we should probably see if he wants to come on this pod because I think he's got quite a lot to offer. Mm-hmm. His statement was very interesting, and basically saying, "Bollocks to you lot." He just said, "Just a quick thing to point out. As most of you don't have a clue what you're talking about, yet speak with so much entitlement. It wasn't my attitude that stopped me from getting into Formula One. It was the super license rules that stopped him getting into Formula One." But he's a very interesting character. He's a lovely guy to me, but I can't stand the way he is and was on the radio. I just think about treating. I love the passion, but I think about treating with your colleagues with respect.
Well, he's certainly
my My dad always used to say, treat everyone as you expect to be treated yourself. So it's...
But he was also a dodgy driver. That was the other. It wasn't just his shouting and screaming. I remember particularly at Azerbaijan when he made a 2 into 1, tried to make it a 3. You know, he would dive up and take people out, and then blame them madly. And I think his driving's calmed down a bit, because I thought when he came to Formula E, he'd be taking wings off at every race. You know, with his impatience. He's an impatient young man, and not having the best car, you know, makes it worse. They were running because he's got Porsche engines this year.
Has the Cooper got Porsche? Yeah, of course it has.
Yeah, they got Porsche engines. So because he was running about 5th, he was in the top sort of 6 for a while and stuff. And
he's a lovely lovely chap. He's a lovely chap. But I'm so old school. I'm just not a fan of being so rude on a radio. But I'm old school, likewise I know what the emotion's like.
This is the
it's
plot.
A bit like, yeah, it's a bit like road rage, isn't it? You either get it or you don't.
So Formula E, it looked good at that track. It looked quite good, and the racing wasn't too past me. There wasn't too much energy saving visible. They didn't go around overtaking each other every corner. So it's all right. It's a good race. I'll let it off. I'll give it a 5 out of 10, which for Formula E is pretty good. We also just could, of course, mention, talking of the kids on the block, Fast Freddie Slater's back in the winning pool.
You were saying last week that he's lost the plot.
Well, he got 70 points. I think he had 2 wins and he had 6th place in the reverse grid race. So he's narrowed the gap to the Evian Goutier, the French championship leader, down to 17 points with 3 races to go. They're going to Qatar for the final round next weekend. So hopefully Freddie can win the Formula Regional Middle East with another double win, which should do it. Also next weekend, then we're going on. Nothing else you wanted to say about that? Good luck, Freddie. World Superbikes make their debut. Again, variety is the spice next weekend. We've got motorbikes, that fantastic Phillip Island circuit, where top breaker Razgatlioglu, who managed to have a high side yesterday in testing, I think, but got away with too much injury. They'll all be trying to beat him again, but I think he's still the favourite. Also down under, the Aussie Supercars kick off in Sydney. So that would be worth watching if you're down there. It's not easy to watch in England because the racing goes on at 3 a.m. or something. It doesn't matter what time it is.
Is it Parramatta or am I making that up?
Is it what?
Parramatta? Is that what's the track called at Sydney?
Oh, I don't know. Didn't go that far. Didn't bother. Sydney will do. The Pro Bike British Rally Championship kicks off in Yorkshire. So you live up in Yorkshire somewhere, you want to have a little wander out this weekend and watch fast rally cars flying past. That's the place to be. Then, fun. Of course, the NASCAR continues, Atlanta this weekend. So we're back. The season's going. Tuesday night, we'll see all the colour schemes. That's the hype of Formula One. If I see one more new crash helmet design or new colour scheme that isn't the real colour scheme, but this is just the practice colour scheme, and then I'm not interested.
You mishblog it. Okay, on that note, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining.
Cheers.
Cheers.